As the standoff in Libya continues, the world battles with the question of how best to deal with the escalating situation. Now, earlier today, France and Great Britain said that if attacks against the Libyan people don't stop, that they would push to set up a no-fly zone over the country. Now, the Arab League threatened similar action yesterday, but the U.S. remains silent about engaging in a military intervention.
All of these matters are under active consideration. But no decisions have been made, and for good reason, because it's not at all clear yet what the situation demands.
There's a lot of, frankly, loose talk about some of these military options, and let's just call a spade a spade. A no-fly zone begins with an attack on Libya to destroy the air defenses. That's the way you do a no-fly zone.
But Senator John McCain seems to strongly disagree.
Once we announced a no-fly zone, most of those Libyan pilots wouldn't fly. We are spending $500 billion, not counting Iraq and Afghanistan, on our nation's defense. Don't tell me we can't do a no-fly zone over Tripoli.
All right, so what's America's best course of action when it comes to Libya? Here with reaction, nationally syndicated radio talk show host, Fox News contributor Monica Crowley, and the former speechwriter for Condoleezza Rice, Elise Jordan, is back with us. You know, Ruth Marcus, liberal, Washington Post, hardly somebody I'd often quote on this program. Really, a day late, dollar short, way behind, no leadership. I mean, you know, you got Great Britain and France and Germany. Where's Obama?
Yeah, you know, in the realm of international relations, very rarely do you get a crystal clear black-white situation like this.
Simple.
You've got an enemy state of the United States, a former state sponsor of terror, exporter of terror, and apart from al-Qaeda, the #1 killer of Americans over the last 30, 40 years. This is an example crying out for American presidential leadership. And here we've got the Secretary of State saying, well, no options are on the table, they're off the table, they're dancing on the table. I have no idea where this administration is coming from.
They need to have the no-fly option on the table, but I think it really has to be carefully considered, because I do understand their hesitation to launch immediately into the no-fly zone option, because it's going to be very difficult with Libya, a huge state. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar operation, and we are overstretched with Iraq and Afghanistan. You look at medevacing troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan when they're injured, it takes at least an hour. Yeah, we don't have enough air assets to necessarily...
All right, but obviously we're going to have the support of our allies and perhaps NATO. It seems to me that it becomes a no-brainer. In other words, look, here we have a mass slaughter of people going on, and we have military jets bombing innocent civilians. The country is going down the tubes, and Gaddafi obviously has to go, and the U.S. doesn't have the moral authority to lead, and it's hesitant, and it's slow to react. I'm having a hard time understanding why.
I think it's very difficult. I mean, we can't go into this unilaterally, and we're overstretched, unfortunately, with Iraq and Afghanistan.
I mean, all these other countries
they need to move NATO, and they need to move the UN into action. And then, if nothing, where I really fault the administration is we aren't doing enough to reach out to opposition leaders. And we aren't building together the opposition coalition that we need so that we have the authority when we do enforce a no-fly zone.
First of all, forget the UN, because if you bring anything to the Security Council, you're going up against China and Russia, which will probably block any kind of action. So it would be a multilateral NATO operation. But you know it's bad, Sean, when you've got the Arab League, you've got Libya's own ambassador to the United Nations, and you have the French, for goodness sakes, being more aggressive about approaching this situation. And look, Sean, Libya is an interest strategically to the United States. We now have a moral interest because there's a humanitarian crisis and a slaughter going on the ground. And we have a very significant economic interest here because this is a big oil producer.
All right, so let's look at the oil issue. Let's look at the price of gasoline. Bloomberg said that oil could go up to $200 a barrel in a very short period of time. That means Americans may be paying higher prices than they've ever paid in their entire lives. There's going to be a shortage. You add to this the instability in Egypt, the Suez, Straits of Hormuz. You know, at some point, even whatever oil is coming out of North Africa or the Middle East, it's going to have a hard time getting to their destinations, and it's going to cost a lot more. And, of course, we do nothing to become energy independent here. Does it have to hit the pocketbook of Americans before we react? We're going to wait till the last minute?
Well, Libya is actually only 2% of the world's oil production, and Europe takes 85% of the oil from Libya. So in terms of
but that oil comes back to be refined here in the U.S.
Yes. I mean, and this is why I'm not opposed to drilling in the Gulf or in Alaska.
No, I'm a drill guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, separate from that, it is oil at the end of the day, and it looks like this situation is much more akin to Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, built in the same mold. In the Arab media, we're getting hammered into for, we're looking, the Americans just want to come in and colonize again.
I've got to think that people in the Middle East, and they know the oil reserves we have here, they must think we're stupid.
Well, they really do really stringently question what we're doing in the United States when we have all of these domestic resources that we could be exploiting.
It's unbelievable.
But we don't. Right. You know what I think is so interesting? Today, there was a Libyan rebel. He used to be a soldier. He's now leading the opposition forces, who said, bring Bush. Bring Bush and establish the no-fly zone. And I'll tell you something, Sean, a lot of people have questioned, why is Obama being so reluctant to work more aggressively here on behalf of the Libyan people? And you know what it is? He is so obsessed with being the anti-Bush, being the anything but Bush, that he won't even embrace the freedom agenda. That's the right, correct, and moral policy for the United States.
I agree, but it's almost like he's frozen at the moment that he needs to make a critical decision. He voted present most of his life as an Illinois senator.
He was never an executive.
That too.
Well, but I'm just very glad that President Bush, we don't have to worry about weapons of mass destruction in Libya. But with the situation,
there was a report that we might have to.
Well, we might have to. But it's very easy to say, we need to go in, we need to start using our American military might. But in the Cold War, we didn't always necessarily do that. In the Hungarian uprising, we just got out of the Korean War, where we had lost 125,000 troops. It might not necessarily. We have to be cautious.
Guys, good to see you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Sean.
And coming up next, could John Edwards be going to jail? You're going to hear a brand new bombshell voicemail messages that could lead directly to the indictment of the former presidential candidate. And then the very latest on the brazen terrorist attack in Germany that took the lives of 2 U.S. airmen. That and much more coming up. And tonight, shocking new voicemail surfaced in the John Edwards scandal as a grand jury hears testimony on charges that the former senator used campaign money to cover up an illicit affair with Rielle Hunter. Now, prosecutors could issue an indictment any day now, and these never-before-heard recordings are just the very latest incriminating evidence in this case. Now, the voicemail, which all came from the phone of former Edwards aide Andrew Young, seemed to indicate the senator must have known more than he originally let on. Now, this one, for example, left by billionaire attorney and Edwards' confidant, the late Fred Barron, refers to the now infamous mistress by name.
Hey, Andrew, it's Fred Barron. Just wanted to give you an update on our dear friend Rielle.
And what about this one left by the senator himself?
I'm standing out in 18-degree temperatures to call. And please tell her I said hello, and I'll call later tonight.
Now, just over a year ago, Andrew Young was on this very show and defended why he held on to these tapes and messages for so long.
It was corroboration of what we were saying. I mean, at the point when this started 2 years ago, the senator had promised me that he was going to come clean and tell the whole truth. At that point, Elizabeth and John were still held in high esteem, Elizabeth especially. Nobody would have believed our words. I mean, we're little peons.
All right, so will Young's decision to preserve the voicemail messages prove to be his saving grace, and could they provide the evidence necessary to indict John Edwards? Joining me now with reaction, attorney and Fox News contributor Tamara Holder and Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, who just successfully oversaw a lawsuit in her state against the federal government, which a judge declared Obamacare unconstitutional. Pam, before we get to Edwards, I got to ask you about this because Judge Vinson, in his original ruling, seemed to be very, very clear here that he expected the Obama administration to comply with his ruling. And now basically he has said and ruled that, in fact, he wants them to expedite. So he seemed to back off a hair. Your reaction?
Well, Sean, what he reaffirmed for all of us, what you and I know, is that we would basically have to rewrite our United States Constitution to make it legal what they're trying to do. And he told them that they need to, if they want to stay, they have to expedite this. They have 7 days to file their appeal, and they have to agree to expedite this through the 11th Circuit to get us to the Supreme Court as soon as possible.
All right. Tamara, let's go to the John Edwards case. Here's John Edwards. He denied that he had any knowledge. He denied that he had any approval. Now, there seems to be a lot of evidence building. The grand jury's been hearing all this testimony. I think there's a very strong likelihood he's about to be indicted.
Well, it depends on if we're having a moral discussion here or, you know, a legal discussion. We know that he is like a douchebag politician who cheats on his wife, like most 99% of them. However, the question is, did he illegally do something? Did he use campaign contributions, or did he do something that violated the law? The prosecutors have been investigating this for like 2 years now, and what they're doing is they're following a paper trail or a money trail. Was he getting his rich friends to put this lady up in fancy homes in Aspen and wherever, or was he using the money directly to take care of her? That's the question.
All right, well, we got a couple of more tapes here, and then we'll get Pam Bondi's take on this. This is Edwards to Andrew Young. Here's what he said.
I'm just checking in with you and making sure you're safe and in a place where you're good.
All right, now let's go to Fred Barron and then his comments to Andrew Young.
Hey, it's Fred. I just had a long conversation with Edwards, and this is just, you know, it's been awful. But we're going to get through it, and I just wanted to be, just tell you how positive I feel like we're going to get through this thing.
And one last one. This is Edwards to Andrew Young.
And it was John, it's 5:48, North Carolina time. I did just find something out about what's on the cover of the National Enquirer.
Now, Pam, this is only a small part of the evidence here, but it seems pretty damning. Seems like he knew what was going on here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and Sean, now wearing my hat as a former prosecutor, not attorney general, I will tell you that, yes, you know, our campaign laws are in effect to protect and ensure proper campaigns. And unfortunately here, what he's being accused of is running a parallel campaign, a covert campaign to hide an affair. And I think they have a tremendous amount of evidence. You just played the tapes. And something else, I really think that they're leaning towards an indictment based on the fact, Sean, that they just moved to, it's called perpetuate the testimony of a key witness, Bunny Mellon. And we know she's 100 years old. And if they weren't planning on indicting, they wouldn't have invited the defense counsel in to take her testimony, to cross-examine her in anticipation of a trial, because she may not be here.
And there's one more fact to that Bunny Mellon, who was a big contributor to John Edwards, that Edwards is also recorded to say, oh, yeah, we can really count on her, meaning financially, which all of this added up together means that he knew that this money was being raised in spite of claims to the contrary. If, in fact, that's true, that's a violation of law. So the reality is he would have to...
But, Sean, what law? What
campaign finance law?
Because here's the thing. First of all, they're looking at, for example, they're looking at laws like honest services, which allows, you know, prosecutors basically full discretion to charge anybody with anything. They're also looking at something called the Hobbs Act, which actually requires quid pro quo. It requires him to say, I will, you know, appoint you to ambassador if you give me money. It requires an exchange or an agreement.
Let me give Pam the last word because we're running out of time. Pam,
Tamara, what we're also looking at are campaign laws and tax laws. And there's so much secrecy, just so everyone knows, involved in the grand jury process. So we don't know everything, but we do know that there are tax laws, because we know he took over $700,000 in personal checks from Bunny Mellon. So there could be tax implications as well as violations of campaign laws.
Pam, Tamara, thank you both for being with us. And Tamara, we won't hold it against you what you called John Edwards. And just a quick programming note, there's been much speculation this week surrounding former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich and his 2012 plans. Tomorrow night, he will be right here in studio with me to set the record straight. But first, it's time to check in with Greta. She's one studio over. She came to visit.
I know. I'm in the fancy studio. I always tease you guys up here in New York. You have such fancy studios, and Brett Barron and
she never invites me on her show.
You can come. Yeah, as soon as you finish, come on over here. Anyway, if you do come over, though, you're going to have some great guests to at least watch tonight from our set, including Senator John McCain, Senator Orrin Hatch, and so much more. So we'll be looking forward to you joining. We have a great American panel tonight. Sean Hannity is our panelist.
Okay. Well, by the way,
bring your football.
Greta, that's the old joke. Greta coming up in our great American panels next.